fish tank.
No, seriously, like it's Hutch. How do you sound, baby? How do you sound?
Mic check 2 1 2.
Fucking perfect per usual.
You
And by
know-
the way, we're live right now, so
Yeah, we all showed up prepared. Once again, minus Pisco. Once again,
every time, man. I'm telling you what, he looks his microphone the wrong way.
It's true. It's true. He claims to not mess with it between each show, which is to say, every single time that the show starts, there's a new miraculous Pisco mic issue.
Yeah, he's like that child who, who goes to the doctors or whatever. He's obviously been picking at his scab, but he lies to the doctor's face. Like, no, I've not been picking it. What are you talking about? Hands covered in blood. Oh God, I'm telling you,
it's all right.
It's going to be effortless at one point. Like I said, we're live now, but it's funny because one of the few games I play is Halo Infinite with friends, and trying to get that thing set up is truly a chore. It takes like 15 minutes to get into the proper lobby to start the game, and it's kind of the same thing with Pisco and Live and Learn. Live and Learn plus Steve Shives. We'll do a proper intro as soon as all this is here. Pisco.
It's not even showing it. Hang on, I'll fix it. I'm gonna get a USB mic and we'll be here in 2 seconds.
Wait, am I crazy or did you sound a little bit better there?
You're crazy.
Okay.
Of course,
All right.
the bar is pretty low at this point. Let's see. You know what? While we're waiting on Pisco, let's just do the right thing here. Let's shout out Mr. Shives here. Look at this.
Oh, hello.
Look at this distinguished gentleman here. So, all right, folks, this is Live and Learn plus a guest, Steve Shives, progressive commentator and pop culture commentator as well. This guy's channel's got it all. His most recent video, When Batman Met Sherlock Holmes, Star Trek review. He also did a touching tribute to President Carter. Then he also talked about Elon Musk wanting to kill Wikipedia. This guy's got it all.
I'm just all over the place. I need to pick a lane, really.
No, man, I think that's the key to your channel. Like we talked about before, you refuse to go just be bottlenecked into politics.
I respect it.
Yeah. Hutch, I think in many ways has the most similar background to you, Steve, when it comes to like content, because he was a gaming streamer before he transitioned into politics. And he says he's done with gaming, but I don't believe it. I think that
He was okay. How do I sound now?
you sound much better.
Oh
There you go.
yes. How you doing? How's everyone doing? Sorry for the delay, folks.
It's fine. It's
all
okay.
good.
It only fucked up everybody's schedule.
Yeah, I know.
You know.
I know.
Yeah.
What can I say?
So we got a Conaboy here. We've got Pisco, who is our resident lawyer. We've got Hutch, who is our resident kind of like multi-purpose tool. He's like a Swiss Army knife because he can talk the economy and the law and current events.
I'm whatever
and
you need me to be.
Yeah, exactly. And again, Steve Shives here, progressive commentator. So, folks, today was a big day.
Huge.
Big day. January 6th, 4-year anniversary of an attack on the United States Capitol by the then sitting president. An insurrection, some would say, Pisco.
The law would say the framers' vision of what an insurrection was under the common law definition of levying war. I would say it's quite clear that this was an insurrection, but of course the Supreme Court did not want to touch that issue.
Yeah.
Well, look, unlike the conservatives, we liberals had to go to work today, so we did not start a riot at the Capitol when our preferred opponent lost. We had jobs to do. So,
For those who don't remember, that is almost a direct quote. I can't remember who. Do you remember who it was?
Oh,
That's what they
I
all
think
don't
it was
remember.
Kirk. That might have been Kirk.
No, that's
Steve, you remember?
They all say that.
I've seen many people. say
It could have
that.
been one of any number of people. I mean,
Yeah, they said that. I guess it was a tongue-in-cheek reference because they said that we rioted during the George Floyd protests, and unlike the liberals, the libtards, the libcucks, and the progressives,
No, you're wrong, and I'm going to call you out because you're misremembering. It was a reference to 2016. Do you remember that era of like anti-woke or like anti-feminist?
But we didn't riot, though, did we? We
no,
didn't
but
riot.
they like you guys all like marched on the women's
that's right.
march.
The women's
That's right.
march was
Yeah.
like
Oh,
right around
shit.
Inauguration Day. Yeah. Yeah, which
Wow.
when I was there, a much bigger crowd than Trump's inauguration, which I'm
No,
sure bothers him
huge
to
crowd.
this day.
Steve, that
At the
can't be true.
time-
We've seen the photos. Do you remember? I think that was the first thing that Sean Spicer did when he like walked out.
God, I mean, it was the biggest crowd ever. Shut up. He's like lecturing the reporters. It was the biggest crowd ever. You shut your mouth.
Way bigger than Obama's. It was massive.
At the time, the Women's March was the largest global civil rights march ever. And then it was only
Wow.
eclipsed by the
George
2020 protests. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. You can tell that Josiah is a real neophyte there, Steve. I mean, people who've been in the politics game a little bit longer, they would understand that reference. They would remember the Women's March, but of course,
Steve,
Josiah.
listen, here's what you have to understand about Pisco. Just giving you some lore here. He's really upset that we're one day closer to Merrick Garland not being Attorney General.
True.
Steve, Pisco,
Your
of
hero?
course.
Shattered, my hero.
Just a huge, Merrick Garland simp right here.
I mean, aren't we all? Hasn't he
We
done
all-
a great job as the
God.
Attorney General? He's been
Based.
exceeded all expectations, really.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's
I know he's joking, but I'm gonna pretend that he agrees with me.
Oh no, he is definitely fucking joking, let me tell you. But no, I mean it's an interesting day for contrast because Hutch, you streamed the full. Did you watch the full certification?
Yeah, it was so fast. I was expecting it to last like 5 or 6 hours. It was over in like 45 minutes. It was like that.
And there were no objections, correct?
I don't recall any. I muted
Yeah.
a bunch, but I mean they got through that fast.
I'm pretty
It
sure
really
there
was a day of contrast, Josiah. For example, there's a silver play button over here next to Steve. I'm not sure if I see one behind you at the moment. I
No,
think
it
you're
got
stuck
lost
at
in the mail.
480.
it got lost. It got lost in the mail.
I was gonna say, if I have one, you should have one.
So,
They're
real
screwing
talk-
you
He's
out of your
close.
plaque.
So real talk. I remember. I think it was like for 100K. You're supposed to get your first one.
Yeah.
And I was waiting for it patiently, and it like 3 weeks later it didn't show up. So I emailed YouTube support, and they're like, we're kind of backlogged on these things, but we promise you're in the pipeline. And that's been like a year and a half, and it still hasn't come. So I've just given up on it. Meanwhile, Hutch is like pushing like 1 million subscribers. He got like 800,000 or whatever. And
I've never got one.
what?
What?
They've literally
Yeah.
never sent me, or maybe they had an old address on file. I'm not sure, but yeah,
Maybe
I've never
Steve
received
has
one.
yours.
Some other person got
Somebody
yours.
got it. Yeah, somebody
Steve's
got,
got
it.
yours.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Steve, I want to see the name on it.
I scraped it off and stenciled my name on. I was like,
Really?
well, this is mine now.
Oh, you're fucking with me.
Oh, you
Yeah,
got
yes.
mine. Gotcha.
Yeah, little
Yes.
little
Well,
bit.
I'm glad it's in good hands, so I can't be too upset.
With the certification, I think lasted about 30 minutes, no objections, and I will say it's totally underappreciated. Like I've of course been tweeting up a storm, much like Pisco has, complaining about it nonstop, the asymmetry. But it sure seems like MAGA doesn't give a single solitary fuck that we did not do to them what they did to us. Is that a bug or a feature?
What they did to the country.
True.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by when I say us, we are the country. Okay, I don't count MAGA as the country.
We're a
Collectively.
representative sample.
Yeah.
Well, they had they had actually had a good reason, whereas the Democrats, we lost by such a blowout that naturally it just didn't make as much sense to do
I see
January 6th.
Steve shaking.
Well, I mean,
You
the
know.
thing is, like, it's supposed to be a formality. Like last
Yeah.
time was the exception when the right lost its collective mind over losing an election, which has happened before and will happen again. But I mean, most of the time, the certification of the Electoral College is nobody pays attention to it because there's no reason to pay attention to it. It's a formality.
Right.
It's so true. You think back to some of the insurrectionist theories, really a coup in search of a theory. I forget who said that. It might have been a district judge somewhere. I think I recall it was a DC district judge. But anyway, the theory was premised on this notion that the vice president might actually have, under the 12th Amendment, a kind of discretionary role to decide which, in fact, are the authentic certificates, and thereby have like the unilateral power to overturn or decide a presidential election. And for that reason, the Electoral Count Act was unconstitutional. There are various such theories like that, but really there is no evidence whatsoever that this was intended to be anything other than completely ceremonial, completely perfunctory. So Steve is 100% correct there.
It doesn't make much sense for it to be otherwise, right? I mean, like, there obviously it's counterfactual, but imagine hopping in a time machine, going back to the founding fathers and say, hey, listen, just to be clear, you all intended for the vice president to basically be able to unilaterally toss out the results of this election, right? Like, they'd throw off their wig and give you the finger. I mean, it's so categorically ridiculous. And I actually want to talk about that in and of itself, because MAGA is so inconsistent, even when it comes to the purported powers of the vice presidency. I do think it's important, though. Earlier today, the vice president put out this video. Can you all hear the audio on this?
The peaceful transfer of power.
Yeah.
Perfect. So this is what she had to say earlier today prior to the certification ceremony.
The peaceful transfer of power is one of the most fundamental principles of American democracy. As much as any other principle, it is what distinguishes our system of government from monarchy or tyranny. Today at the United States Capitol, I will perform my constitutional duty as Vice President of the United States to certify the results of the 2024 election. This duty is a sacred obligation, one I will uphold, guided by love of country, loyalty to our Constitution, and my unwavering faith in the American people. As we have seen, our democracy can be fragile, and it is up to then each one of us to stand up for our most cherished principles and to make sure that in America, our government always remains of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Well, that's really touching.
Patriot.
That last
True
line
patriot.
is really good. Did she write that, you think?
I think she did. I think she came up with it
It's
herself.
really good. Yeah.
I'm afraid it was probably focus tested, though. They put it through a focus group.
Who's this
first.
guy?
Now here's the contrast.
Why is he on a
This-
couch? This is uncomfortable to me.
Well, and let's give him credit. He's on a couch. He's got his pants on, and he's not
He's
dicking it
facing the
down.
right way. Yeah, it's okay.
Exactly right.
That's a very fuckable couch too.
It's a
For-
nice couch.
Jesus.
As
Yeah.
far as
Really nice
couches
couch.
go, there's no kid. Like, yeah,
That is
you
not a nice couch.
I'm not even a couch guy, but I'm thinking about that couch.
It's
Wait.
ribbed for his pleasure. Look
It's-
at
yeah,
that.
exactly.
Real, that's exactly right.
Reel it back,
Yeah.
guys.
Exactly.
What do you mean reel it back? That's the incoming. That's the vice president elect right there. I mean, in theory, we haven't seen much of him since Elon
Yeah.
Musk moved into Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah,
Don't kink shame the future vice president.
True. I really, I really should have been more, respectful. in that
Inclusive.
moment.
No,
Yeah.
100%.
This is America. If he likes couches, that's his private business.
It's very heteronormative of me. I should be more
I feel like he's made it a public business at this point. But what's more disturbing than whatever he does or does not do with couches is what he has said or what he said on this particular couch. So in contrast to what Vice President Harris said, this is what the incoming vice president had to say just a few months before the election about the role of the vice president in certifying elections, specifically what he would have done had he been vice president on January 6, 2021.
He was asked to not certify it.
Sure.
So would you have certified? I'll ask you for the third
Again,
time.
I would have asked the states to submit alternative slates of electors and let the country have the debate about what actually matters and what kind of an election that we had.
You
in
wouldn't
these
have
important
certified,
states.
to be clear.
I would have asked the states to submit alternative slates of
I think
electors.
that's what you're saying.
That's what I would have
So-
done. Again, I've said that publicly many times. But
He was asked to not certify.
So here's J.D. Vance saying, no, listen, instead of certifying the results of the election, I would have just, tossed it back to accommodate fake electors. And the thing I keep wrapping my head around, fellas, is that MAGA doesn't give a fuck. Like, I genuinely believe that a lot of MAGA is aware of this contradiction, this asymmetry, and they actually celebrate it. I think they think it's funny
course.
and cool.
No,
that-
they're laughing at us for even talking about it.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I
wish
fully
more, I wish more
expect
people on our side would realize that. I mean, a lot of us do. Obviously, we're here talking about it, but I mean, it seems like there are a lot more people on our side of the aisle, on our side of the spectrum, who don't seem to get that yet. Like, they don't give a fuck. You can point out their hypocrisy to them until your throat is sore. It won't make a difference to them. They don't care. They will
funny.
do what
It's
they
funny
need
to
to do
them.
to win.
Yeah. Well, I
Sorry.
think, I mean, I fully expect that in 2028, when obviously if there's some even more bizarre Trump third term scenario happening, but if Don Jr. or JD Vance are the Republican nominee in 2028, and they end up losing because their dad is such an unpopular incumbent, sort of a la Joe Biden in 2024. I don't know why a Republican wouldn't just do the same thing that Trump did in 2020. Like, he faced no consequences for it. If anything, you could argue he was just rewarded for it because he won election anyway the next time around. He never faced any jail time. There was no serious conception that he was ever going to go to jail for this. And especially because of the leadership at the time and the precedents that the Supreme Court set, it's just not clear that what even ability would the government have under this current Supreme Court to hold a president accountable for such a thing. I mean, the Supreme Court seems to take the stance that Trump was just having conversations. Oh, he's not allowed to talk to his attorney general about whether or not there was fraud in the elections. Like, okay, if that's the completely
it's
idiotic
so key
standard,
there. What you just said there, Econoboy. Like, if you just use only government, personnel that, by the way, are all being handpicked now, per the Project 2025 strategy, as being just fiercely loyal to Trump. If you just use the mantle of power that you've invested to do all your criminal activities, they become magically converted into this untouchable kind of thing. So far as the president is concerned, and notice here, even if you weren't to apply the logic of the presidential opinion and of the immunity decision down to other levels of executive official, which would be wild, and it's never been the case. But I think logically it should follow, right? Like, if you're just following a president's order, the order itself being supposed to be above review, why shouldn't someone just following that order also not, by the vigorous executive branch theory that the Supreme Court put forth, why wouldn't they be immune as well? But even if you don't buy that, which I totally do, he can just pardon. There's like a window between January 6th and when he leaves office where he could just pardon all of his cronies that were involved there. And of course, he's going to be immune for anything that he does. And so, it's a complete little gap in criminality that the president can abuse entirely to entrench himself in power, which is exactly what Sotomayor was warning about. But instead, Roberts, I guess, was more worried that he would be too careful to follow the law.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just think that in 2028, I don't know if there's a way for the Democrats to get sort of not pre-clearance, but some sort of prejudgment on this issue, because I mean, of course, I don't see how we don't just end up in 2020 with one extra step where, oh yeah, Republican nominee / vice president JD Vance says, oh yeah, I'm not counting these slates of electors because I happen to have an opinion that there was widespread voter fraud. Which is just going to inevitably result in the Supreme Court having to take a strong stance on this issue. And so I don't know, this is one thing that I think Republicans were criticized in 2024. It's like, if you had all these problems with the voting procedures in these states, you probably should have challenged them in advance. So I don't know if there's a way to challenge this kind of legal theory in court before it actually happens. Because unfortunately, if this happens in January 6th of 2029, well, there's only in theory 2 weeks, there's 2 weeks until the next president's supposed to take office. So the time constraint gets very scary. And I'd be deathly afraid of a Bush v. Gore situation 2.0 where the Democrat ends up winning. But the Supreme Court, I mean, if the Supreme Court agrees with this legal theory, I don't know with what rationale you can say that some sort of revolution or some sort of serious restructuring of our government wouldn't be rational, because you're basically saying that there's not a democracy in this country anymore and that your vote actually just doesn't matter. It's just up to the Supreme Court at that point, which is obviously a very scary prospect.
Hutch, what do you think? Do you think that because you saw today, you saw it was a pretty smooth process. You saw that there were no objections. You also saw the faces of the Republicans and Mike Johnson as well. Based on things that JD Vance has said, do you think that there is a meaningful risk that on January 6, 2029, that Vice President JD Vance will play games with the certification? Or do you think we've kind of moved past the worst of January 6th, given the outrage and the updates to the Electoral Count Act?
Well, I mean, to the point of how today went, I feel like the peaceful transfer of power is not something you really notice until it's threatened. And so to Steve's point, when he was talking, this is just supposed to be a formality. And so, in some ways it felt like we were just sort of quote unquote back to normal today in terms of what's going to happen in 2028 or 2029 rather, when the election is certified. To be honest with you, I'm in a mode right now where I'm just taking these things as they come, and I'm not really thinking about 4 years from now. So I haven't really put a lot of thought into that, to be honest. And as we get closer to it, maybe I'll have some stronger opinions as it becomes more relevant. But for now, I'm really focused on the weeks ahead, like the inauguration, what the first part of Trump's term is going to look like. I'm very curious to see if they're going to be able to pull off a big reconciliation package. It was reported yesterday and the day before that Trump is pushing Congress to get everything done in one bill. I guess ostensibly because he wants to save another reconciliation package for later in the year. But I suppose we'll touch on that in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll definitely touch on that. I guess we'll close the loop on this particular question with Steve. As the fellow cynic, the fellow pessimist, do you think we've moved past the January 6th peak of Republican shenaniganry, or would you not put it past Vice President Pence in the future, Vice President Vance in the future to try to fuck with the results of the 2028 election?
Well, I think it depends on how things go from here, but of course I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, it would be nice to say, well, hey, maybe, the Democrats will win big in the midterms in 26, and then they'll win the presidential election in 28 by such an inarguable margin by the popular vote and the electoral college that it would be foolish to even try to dispute it. And of course, Vance would just have to go along with it, because to not go along with it would be to just be nakedly defying the will of the people. But I mean, there's a lot of ifs built into that statement. I mean, if the election is close enough, assuming that they lose, let's not be too optimistic, assuming that they lose the election in 2028, and it's a close enough loss that Vance or whoever feels like it would be worth trying to do what they tried to do in 2020, but do a better job and a more successful job, of course I wouldn't put it past them. To take it back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, they don't care. Like, they don't care. If they think that it'll end with them still being in charge, that's what they'll do.
Yeah, I've got one last clip to play on the double standard of January 6th. I just think that this is something that MAGA is not going to be affected by this, but there may be some people on the margins, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps, who actually care about consistency and principles. This, to me, is the ultimate death blow, or one of them, rather. I guess I should say one of the shots, the mortal injuries to the argument that the vice president can simply throw out the results of the election. And this comes from the architect of the Mike Pence scheme. This information is being relayed by a Mike Pence advisor, but the hypocrisy is stunning.
Mr. Jacob, did Dr. Eastman say whether he would want other vice presidents such as Al Gore after the 2000 election, or Kamala Harris after the 2024 election, to have the power to decide the outcome of the election?
So this was one of the many points that we discussed on January 5th. He had come into that meeting trying to persuade us that there was some validity to his theory. I viewed it as my objective to persuade him to acknowledge he was just wrong. And I thought this had to be one of the most powerful arguments. I mean, John, back in 2000, you weren't jumping up and saying Al Gore had this authority to do that. You would not want Kamala Harris to be able to exercise that kind of authority in 2024, when I hope Republicans will win the election. And I know you hope that too, John. And he said, absolutely. Al Gore did not have a basis to do it in 2000. Kamala Harris shouldn't be able to do it in 2024, but I think you should do it today.
That was from the Jan 6 subcommittee, right?
That was.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. It's so fucking aggravating, like, seeing these people just in real time. And again, MAGA doesn't give a goddamn, so I suppose there's no point in dwelling on it.
Well, part of that was also, I mean, yeah, they're just complete naked hypocrites. That's the main thing. But also, don't forget that is premised on the idea of, well, Pence is allowed to do it this time because there's all this evidence of voter fraud. And we have all this evidence that the election wasn't honest, and therefore the vice president has a responsibility to do X, Y, and Z. Whereas presumably, well, there was nothing controversial about the election in 2000.
Exactly.
And presumably they were saying, as it turned out was the case, there was no controversy in 2024 either. It was a clear-cut result that I wish had gone another way, but it was a clear-cut result. But the problem with that is there actually was no evidence of voter fraud or of anything irregular happening in the 2020 election. The Republicans and Trump just made that up, and then got really mad when people said, "Okay, where's the evidence?" And they didn't have any evidence. So they got thrown out of
Steve,
court
come on.
over and over and over
He's
again.
going to have that press conference any day now where he reveals all the damning evidence.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I know. I should also say, too, that while all this was going on, Trump also was blasting President Biden on Truth Social, saying that Biden is doing everything possible to make the transition as difficult as possible.
Oh, my God.
From lawfare such as never before seen to costly and ridiculous executive orders on the Green New scam and other money-wasting hoaxes. Fear not. These orders will all be terminated shortly, and we will become a nation of common sense and strength. MAGA.
To say that this is the pot calling the kettle black is so obvious that it's absurd. It's barely even worth mentioning. Just how difficult he was during the transition in 2020 / early 2021.
Yeah,
and for
even
him to be
without
accusing
January 6th.
Biden of doing that is even without. They didn't do a transition. His administration was instructed to proceed as though they're going to be inaugurated again on January 20th, 2021. So
I mean,
this is just absurd.
reporting. I mean, there was reporting at the time that Biden was having a difficult time even getting security briefings, which is just like
Right.
amongst the most irresponsible things you could do during a presidential transition. You got a president taking office and he doesn't know like what are the major like intelligence operations going on, like what's the military doing. I just have to find that shit out after 12 o'clock on January 20th, right? Like that's obviously not. There's just a reason why the transition should be handled in a very deliberate manner. And obviously Trump was, Trump is a very classless person, right? So obviously he didn't give a fuck about that. But that's just, we're going to see a lot of this over the next 4 years, right? I mean, that's kind of my very, very baseline, like rock bottom prediction. Just almost 99% guarantee this will happen is we're just going to see Trump do a lot of stupid shit because he's a dumb person. And he doesn't really quite understand how government works, despite having been president for 4 years. And he's going to say a lot of stupid shit. And we're just going to have a lot of little news stories like this, like, oh, like department does something stupid, something gets reclassified in an incompetent way. I mean, Pisco, I remember his DACA executive order was overruled. Basically, the Supreme Court said, yeah, actually, you probably have the power to do this. You just did it in such an incompetent way that we just can't stand for it. Like, that was kind of
that was his rescission was ruled arbitrary and capricious under the Administrative Procedures Act, which basically says you wrote the memo wrong, or you didn't have sufficient like hearings on it, or you didn't consider the right evidence, to have a fully rational. It's a very kind of deferential at times posture towards the government, but yeah, I mean these courts, in terms of substantive power, the president has a great deal of authority, and right now they've learned a lot from their mistakes. Think about like the first time you started YouTube. Or the first time you've done a new talent or new skill or something, you make a shit ton of mistakes. Or the first time you had like a relationship, you make a lot of mistakes, and you learn afterwards, and you come back and you're way better, and you don't, wear as much cologne on the first date or to the dance. That never happened to me. I just want to make, like, I didn't absolutely put a shit ton of Axe body spray on me and go into a car and get embarrassed by the girl's dad. That did not happen to me.
Definitely what happened.
But you learn from those mistakes, and over time, and I think they're going to be a lot better at doing fucked up shit.
Yeah. So what's interesting
really?
is I didn't realize that the president's executive orders. I thought that was like a plenary power where they didn't really need a particular justification or whatever. That
Are
they
you
could
memeing? I can't tell.
No, for real. Like when I didn't realize that, I assumed that once the president issued an executive order, like they could effortlessly and with no predicate whatsoever just rescind it basically at will.
Are you fucking with me?
No, I'm serious.
Oh,
I'm dead
sorry,
serious.
my bad.
Yeah.
Okay. No. Yeah. So there's Congress passed a law that basically is a default that says so for example, certain laws. Have you heard of advice and consent or sorry, not advice and consent? Notice rulemaking authority, where like there's notice and comment periods for different rules, and they blast out the rule, and they're like you have to get insiders to come in and pitch their ideas. Oftentimes there's like specific procedures that the government has set out as a default that they have to go through in order to do stuff. And Congress made that law, and it pertains to the use of executive authority. So it applies to both sometimes actions and inactions and rescissions. And so rescission is often like an action you can look at. And so a lot of this stuff is reviewable. It's deferential. And that's why it's really important to have your ducks in a row when you write that initial memo, because one of like the key foundational law things is the rationale that you go with initially, you can't like just constantly be changing it in the middle of litigation. But Trump could have, if he wanted to, rescind that order, issue a new order. But it's unpopular what he was doing. What he was doing was leverage for the budget negotiations. And what he was doing was he wanted to build the wall, and that's why that's why he did that. He punished it because he lashed out.
Well, is it fair to say
he took it away so he could offer it as a bargain
That's
chip?
right,
It was loathsome to put people, like there are 900,000 I think at this point DACA recipients, and so to put hundreds of thousands of people in that way, to upend their life like that, to throw their life into such uncertainty, to make them a bargaining chip, it just speaks to his character. And
it does hutch, and it's absurd and it's cruel. Like today he was like, these DACA kids are not kids really. Some are old, some are incredibly old. It's always incredibly. It's always like the higher.
The oldest you've ever seen.
But you're absolutely right.
The oldest, some would say.
And older than me, these kids, they're not kids. They're bicentennial aliens. No. But like, it's absolutely insane that that's overlooked. And he comes out like he's the defender of DACA, just like he, by the way, for the healthcare stuff.
He did the same thing with the ACA.
He improved the Affordable Care Act by getting rid of the individual mandate. When everyone knows the reason he got rid of the individual mandate was to try to go into court and rule it unconstitutional because the basis of the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act was that it was a tax. So if you remove the amount of the tax, does it make the ACA unconstitutional? And that's what he was doing. Yeah,
gaslighting is a term that gets thrown around way too much, but these are really good examples of like the crazy stuff that he tried to right.
It's to the point that I think Steve was bringing up, or maybe it was Josiah, about the crowd size and the contradictions and stuff. The contradictions are part of it. The contradictions are the name in the game, and I hate bringing up Orwell all the time because in recent memory, because it really is cliche, and you look like a snob when you do it. But the contradictions are part of it.
Put on your fucking monocle if you're going to quote Orwell, okay? Like,
tipping my fedora, like, but it's 100% true, and you see that with H-1B visa. I've always been in favor of immigration. What are you talking about? I've always been, and you're going to see it more and more and more because what they know and what they understand is power, just like Putin, just like all these autocrats.
Yeah. Meanwhile, one of his chief advisors, Stephen Miller's on Twitter, like, we will establish an Aryan nation, like just so like full on. He's not literally saying that, but like,
isn't he Jewish?
Yeah. His relative, I think his uncle, wrote an op-ed about their Jewish roots and how it was so shameful.
Nobody tell him.
He doesn't like to talk about.
Oh God.
But no, Trump's administration, they not only went after illegal immigration, but they sought to limit, and they did, legal immigration. So they chopped it down to like half or a quarter of what it was in the previous administration.
Yeah, I think this is a conversation I had on another show where I was like, I feel like one of the things that makes the Democrats better in governing is just that the coalition that the Democrats govern is not so, like, I don't think it's quite as wide of a coalition as many on the progressive left would like you to think, right? So, like, if we were to compare, like, the difference between, like, Henry Cuellar and, like, AOC, pretty big difference. Like, obviously, Henry Cuellar is, like, a super right-wing Democrat compared to AOC. Don't get me wrong. But on a lot of these basic...
Also under investigation, I believe, by the Department of Justice.
Don't get me wrong. He's going to get a pardon after he switches and becomes a Republican. So he's, that's very temporary. But, but currently he's the most right-wing Democrat. And, and so there's a chasm of difference there. But, like, I think that, number one, the progressives are a lot more willing to kind of meet people halfway. Like, okay, we can't get all the welfare reform we want, but we'll take 25% of it. That's what Henry Cuellar will agree to, kind of the most narrow opinion. And then on a lot of procedural stuff like passing budgets, raising the debt ceiling, it seems like the Big Tent's in total agreement. Like, there's not really like, oh, let's just destroy the economy with not raising the debt ceiling Democrats. But when you look at the Republican coalition, which basically ranges from like white nationalists to Mitt Romney, this is a more disagreeable group of people, it feels like. Like, it seems like there's a lot more troublemakers on the Republican side, and there's a lot more sort of irreconcilable opinions, right? Where like some people like Elon Musk and Vivek are like, yeah, I just don't hate brown people and immigrants like as much as you do, but then
I hate
people on the
jocks.
right,
I hate
right,
the
yeah.
fucking the prom
people on the
king.
right, right. But
Yeah.
then there's a lot of people on the right that are like, oh, this is an example of these immigrants, Elon Musk and Vivek. They're coming in and changing our culture, and like, it's like, oh my god, like these people can't get along. They can't
Yeah.
agree to anything.
On the topic of the debt.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You haven't spoken in a little bit.
Well, they managed to keep their shit together long enough to get past the election, and then it's not even inauguration day yet, and they're already
They can't govern
falling
together.
apart. Well, I mean, because part of another facet of what you were saying there is, there's more just basic governmental competence on the Democratic side, and the Republicans are kind of divided between, in terms of like elected Republicans, there's a division between people who have like really loathsome political and social views, but are generally interested in actually trying to govern and to wield the government in a way that will further their aims, and people who just have no interest and no aptitude for that at all, and just are there basically just to throw bombs, rhetorically speaking, hopefully, and just try to fuck stuff up. And they have absolutely no interest and no skill set remotely suited to actually governing.
Yeah, he's not elected. I was just going to say he's not elected, but Stephen Miller, one of you guys brought him up. He's a good example of somebody with loathsome views, but really wants to use the government as a vehicle for policy outcomes. He's going to be the deputy White House chief of staff for policy. Russell Vogt, who's going to be the director of the Office of Management and Budget. I mean, this is a guy who is a major architect of Project 2025. He also sees, the government as a tool, a policy vehicle. But then you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert who don't seem to give a fuck, or Matt Gaetz, who's no longer part of Congress. As a matter of fact, I think Congress actually applauded the day that they elected Mike Johnson to be speaker because they said that he would not be returning to Congress. So yeah, like this is that sort of divide is emblematic there. And I also question, whether or not people like Chip Roy or Thomas Massey, some of the more like fiscal hawks, and Massey as a libertarian, because my position is by virtue of being a libertarian, you're not a serious person about governing.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So to me, is it like but wouldn't you consider, don't you consider Stephen Miller and Marjorie Taylor Greene like equally MAGA? Because the way I typically conceive of it, it's like MAGA and non-MAGA, what they call Main Street Republicans. But I actually think even within MAGA, there's like this internal contradiction.
100%.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
For sure.
sure.
I mean, I was gonna say, like, you'll find we've talked about this before, like when Mussolini was in charge of Italy, there was a factionalism within like the Italian fascist party, but what you would find is how they would orient their criticism would be radically different, right? So like they would all say like, oh, we love Mussolini, he's a great guy, none of this is his fault, like, he's doing the best he can, it's really you people in this coalition that's causing our great leader to not really live up to his best potential. And you'll see that with some of the criticism that like Thomas Massey, right? Like he'll say something like, look, I love Trump. I love, just to be clear, guys, listen, I love Trump. Let's not, get it twisted. I'm just really against the federal government spending money, right? And like, this is how a lot of these more like agitating Republicans will frame their criticism nowadays. And it is a sign of the sort of coalescence under Trump. But I think that people like Thomas Massey, as stupid as he is, he's a real one. Like he really does believe in fucking getting rid of all the welfare in the country. Same thing with like a guy like Mike Lee. And so, I could totally see a scenario where Thomas Massey causes some budget chaos, not unlike he tried to do with the speaker election. It's just that Chip Roy flipped sides. Same thing with that Ukrainian lady who Hutch does a great impression of.
Victoria Spars.
Jesus Christ.
They basically decided not to cause chaos, but I think when a budget fight comes up in March, or like a debt ceiling has to, come up and get raised, I think we're almost certainly going to see a government shut. I'd be shocked if they could pass.
Well, on the topic of the debt ceiling, I saw a clip of Mike Johnson on Maria Bartiromo, I think her name is. Bartiromo. I'm sorry. Yeah. But he was simultaneously saying that they can, increase the debt ceiling while at the same time committing to making substantial cuts to the federal budget. And it's like, he said, we can do both of those things at the same time. And it's like, well, this is inherently contradictory. Like if you were committed to chopping the federal budget, you would not even entertain for a moment
It's not
raising the
necessar-
debt ceiling. This makes no fucking sense.
It's not necessarily contradictory because
You could
could
raise
be
the debt
cut-
ceiling and then cut the budget, right?
But you also you could cut you could cut like the budget, and the debt could still be rising by a significant amount. And so, but I see what you're saying in terms of their whole thing was they are going to completely cut stuff so that we're no longer with this huge deficit problem. So why should it be the case that we're having to constantly increase the debt ceiling? If his whole thing was he was going to manage the budget, give us a surplus, that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, I see what you're saying. And it's a total indication that there's certain people on the left right now that we talk about way too much and that we reference way too much, who are very
And by
sanguine.
we mean you.
And frankly, it's sort
What
of
is
an
the weekly TYT news update?
obsession? Yeah, I know that.
Well,
I've been a little
we are gonna ask Steve about this, and
Sure.
he can comment. He can say,
Is this his
I don't.
first public comment in the?
I have no
controversy?
idea. I know he's not done a video about it yet. He may want to refrain. And Steve, that is
I feel
absolutely
like you
your
were a bad host.
prerogative.
We didn't really introduce Steve.
We
We're
don't
just like, oh,
introduce
Steve is
Steve at
dead.
all. We're like, this is Steve. He's the new host. He's replacing.
We did.
you
Wait a
because
minute.
your
Wait a
mic
minute. Were
sucks.
you not paying attention? I literally
I
brought
wasn't.
his.
Wait, put my
No, wait.
my
I know what's
YouTube
going
channel
on here. I know what's going on here. You're one of those H-1B visa guys who makes me train the new guy, and you're kicking me off.
That's true.
That's exactly
No,
what it is.
no.
You might as well admit
Josiah-
it. He's figured it
Josiah
out.
Josiah said, "This is Steve. He has a channel." But like,
That's
Steve,
not
you
what
are-
I said, asshole. Listen to me. I even
We're-
brought the
we're-
fucking channel up.
Those
I
weird
showed
exact
off.
Put it on the
words.
screen.
I showed off that he
Yes.
has 280,000
He did do
subscribers.
that.
We literally scrolled through. You didn't pay a
Gaslighting.
fucking bit of attention.
No, but if somebody,
You are
I'll do it
fake
again. I'll do it again. Fuck it. We'll do it live. To quote Bill O'Reilly, we'll do it live. I'll write it. And okay, so here's Steve Shives,
pretty
progressive political commentator, 280,000 subscribers. Steve, you got a little something right here, baby. You got a little something.
Yeah, just a
Clean
little
that up.
bit.
Yeah, and again, he is a progressive political commentator and a pop culture commentator who focuses primarily
Batman.
on Star
Wait.
Trek.
Wait, hold on.
Whoa.
Hold on. What is your opinion of Everything Everywhere All at Once?
see, now we're learning the real Steve.
Oh God! That's a great movie.
Okay. All right.
Great
What
Steve,
were
what's
you-
the best
what was he gonna
Batman
say?
film?
It
He's all
sucks?
right.
Nobody say anything. Nobody say
He's
anything.
okay.
Steve, what's the
What?
best Batman film?
Oh boy, it's tough. I mean, for me right now, it's between either the Batman or the Dark Knight.
You got to pick one.
I'm
Gotta pick one.
When you say the Batman, you're referring
Commit to
to
it. Come on, it's okay. Say it. You
the
can
most
say it. You
recent
can say
one.
it.
The most recent.
Okay.
one.
Yes.
Um,
Yes,
No
that's
one
correct.
indicate. No one indicate.
I would say that. I would say that. I mean, again, I would say the Batman. Yeah.
No.
That is the
the
correct
Batman.
opinion.
But
Yes,
but
great.
here's the thing: we Batman fans have been. When you look back at the record, we have been surprisingly blessed with some very good and very I love the
George
Adam West
Clooney.
one.
I like George Clooney. No, I like all the Bruce Waynes. I like all of them. I like all the
I
Batmans.
like George Clooney in general
Bruce
as an
Wayne, yeah.
actor. I think his Batman movie is terrible. Although I do think it's better than Val Kilmer's. I'm controversial. I think Batman
Wait,
Forever is
really?
worse than
I like
Batman
both of
than
them, and
Batman
I think Val
Robin.
Kilmer does a good job.
No,
I
What
think
about-
Val Kilmer is going to make a comeback as Batman.
Now,
think
would you say
so?
Nicole Kidman?
I
Would you
do.
say
I
Nicole
hope so.
Kidman is the most beautiful woman in the world, or the second most beautiful woman in the
Kim
world?
Basinger. What are you talking about?
Now we're fighting over Batman's movie girlfriends. I love it.
Sorry to distract, guys.
I had to get a wellness check done recently because they fucking delayed the Batman 2 another year.
Another
It was
year.
supposed to come out October of this year. Was supposed to be
Hey,
the Batman 2,
as
and it got
well-
delayed to. Yeah, go ahead.
I say give them the time they need. Let them.
I mean,
the
true.
movie.
Listen, Matt.
Yeah.
I think Matt Reeves is just such
Yeah.
a talented filmmaker, and so I trust. Like, if he says he needs another
Yeah.
year, then
I mean,
fine,
yeah. Well, because
whatever.
what's the
but
option?
it's a huge
fucking
bummer.
thing. The fucking thing's not even written yet. So, like, what's the option? We're still making it, even though the script's not done. It's like, you
Right.
know, if Matt Reeves says, I still need time to write it. Then,
So I just want to throw this back up on the screen because in 15 minutes, Econo Boy is going to be like, who the fuck is Steve Shives? So we're
Look,
going to go through it again.
we learned more about the real Steve ever since.
is it
I
like a
started
memento type of thing?
second-
Like, you
It-
just sort of,
yes.
your memory fades?
No,
after?
he's just shotgunning one too many PBRs or something. I have
That's
no
true.
idea.
That's true.
Um,
one too many.
yeah, one too many. And
So
so
the memory eraser.
100%. So yeah, he focuses primarily on Star Trek, but he's just
Star Trek, Hunter
yeah.
Biden, and Batman. Basically, all of my
The big three.
the big three.
That's what brings in the views, baby.
My
what did you-
my favorite series that he does, you guys need to check this out, is he says there's a series that he does called Republicans Saying the Quiet Parts Out Loud. And it's like over every particular topic. And Steve like dresses like, well, like JD Vance actually. He just throws on a white button up and a red tie, throws on a wig, and he like fakes this press conference as if it's like a Republican politician just leveling with the audience. It's like really funny, cynical, dark shit, but really worth your time.
The JD Vance thing, that wasn't the plan. He kind of like, I just sort of put on a wig, and then I naturally already have a beard, and then JD Vance becomes
You fucking
the VP
manifested
nominee,
him,
and I was
Steve.
like, oh fuck, what is
Steve,
this?
you manifested him. He became like
not him.
You birthed him effectively.
I mean, he wrote that fucking hillbilly book before I even started doing those videos. So
now that's actually a
it's
book
not
that I have
completely-
not read or a movie I've not seen.
no, I
movie
almost
is trash.
I was this close to watching the movie a few months ago, just so because I'm a co-host on a movie review podcast, and I thought maybe I'll watch it for that and we can talk about it. But I can't bring myself to do it.
I got through 15 minutes. I turned it off. There was a scene where like, he's like a salt of the earth guy, right? And now he's in this elite institution and he has to go to this dinner and he's like freaking out because he doesn't know what silverware to use for like the course of the meal. And so he calls his girlfriend, who's now his wife or whatever, and she's like, I can't fucking do it. I just had to check out at that point. It was trash. That movie
real
was
human
horrible.
drama, the kind of thing that would actually happen to a real person in real life.
No, because the reason that Hutch tuned out was because he's like, it's so fucking obvious. The salad fork goes on the left. Everybody knows it. He
Who
flipped
doesn't
the desk.
know this?
Yeah. God.
What did you think of the Superman trailer?
I'm optimistic.
Yeah,
I'm
me
very
too.
optimistic. I mean, I have confidence. I have a lot of confidence in James Gunn. I've been watching Creature Commandos, and it is just it has no right to be as good as it is. And James Gunn is writing that, and I'm like, okay, if this is his, sort of opening act for his version of the DC Comics movies, and I feel like we're doing pretty good here.
Yeah, I
We
like the
agree that
dog.
currently the quest for peace is still like the ultimate, Superman movie. It's like the rise of Skywalker of Superman.
It really
It's
is.
like it's so
his
damn good.
his superpower as a filmmaker though is that he does the characters so well. Like he
he's great.
makes you care about these characters. I knew nothing about I myself, along with probably 95% of people that were watching MCU films, knew nothing about the Guardians of the Galaxy going into that first movie. And by the end of the trilogy, you're so attached to every single character. And so
they were those movies were probably my favorite little subsection of the MCU.
Right.
Because you can't. I mean, it's like you're so invested in these people. Well, and the same thing. I mean, with Peacemaker.
Right.
Peacemaker
The one show
is so good.
One of two shows whose intro I never skip, the other one being Angel, that opening theme song.
Yeah,
is
Hutch
so
is
good.
complaining.
yes.
He's complaining about the wait between Batman films. Meanwhile, Peacemaker, 3.5 year wait between
What?
seasons.
Wait,
Yeah.
when was the first season? I thought that was
Peacemaker,
2022.
January 22. It's
Yeah.
coming out this summer. Season
Well,
2.
it takes time. It takes time. John Cena's busy.
3.5 years.
He's busy.
How busy could he be?
He's been
He
in
makes-
like he's in the ultimate movie franchise at the moment,
He's
back
doing
to back.
and it's a good thing
Fast
they
and the
snuck it in.
Furious.
That's true. It's a good thing they got Cena in there when they could, because now he's going to be wrestling all year this year. This is his farewell year as a wrestler starting now. So I mean, I don't know how many movies he's going to be able to do.
Has he still
So
been
James-
wrestling this whole time?
James, not regularly, not full
Oh.
time, but
Part-
this is his farewell tour this year. So I'm sure James Gunn was like, "No, you wrestle next year, motherfucker. You're doing Peacemaker. Like, we got to get this thing shot."
Even with what he did with the Suicide Squad, I thought was a worthy effort. What he did
Oh,
with the
I thought it was
character,
great.
like contrast what David Ayer did with the character of Harley Quinn with what he did, and it's just night and day. I mean, he just
Wait,
really
did Gunn do the first one or the second one?
he did the second one,
The
which was kind
Suicide.
of like a soft reboot. Like I guess
Yeah.
technically they're in the same universe, but not really.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really worry about that, but yeah. I mean, as soon as with Gunn Suicide Squad, as soon as I saw Starro, I was like, this is going to be okay. we're going to be fine. Like if
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
big Hollywood director that's like, I want Starro in it. I'm like, okay, that's my kind of guy. He's not embarrassed by how goofy it is. He's like, no, I want the giant space starfish to be the villain. And then he makes you feel bad for him at the end.
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh God.
Humble brag, but James Gunn does follow me on Twitter. I know.
No,
I know.
he fucking doesn't.
Oh,
Yeah,
bullshit.
he does.
Hang
I have
on.
no idea how that happened. I don't know how
So
that
when
happened.
That was
Tweet
all.
against-
By the way, that's
But it
all
did.
this was. Just by the way, this was
It was
Hutch
just one
teeing
elaborate
it up.
setup. Yeah, just
Yeah.
to
So
throw
when
that at you guys.
Hutch, when you have this little like tweet spasm against Rob Knorr, and you're like, oh my God, Rob Knorr doesn't give a shit about veterans.
Right.
James Gunn has seen that.
That's the thing. And dude, another humble brag
And
was
nodding
Kamala,
along.
Kamala fucking Harris followed me on Twitter.
No, she
in
didn't.
In 2018, and then she
Did she
started running for
unfollow?
president, and I blocked her and unblocked her so it would have her unfollow me because I'm too much of a liability, bro. I don't need to be like national.
What?
You
news.
jumped
I
on
don't-
the
That is a
grenade.
patriot.
I don't
That
need
is
to
a
be. I don't,
patriot.
right. That's what I'm saying. I did what I did.
You're
what I
canceling
did.
yourself.
You did
You're
right
like
for the
the-
country.
But that's the thing. Like when somebody like that follows you, it does make you super self-conscious about
Wait, no,
what
no,
you're tweeting. And so
Steve, can you please? I mean, I need your opinion on this. He just self-canceled himself against Kamala Harris. He had the ear potentially of the next president of the United States on Twitter. Like he would be showing up on her feed, or at least her staffer's feed. And
She
he
could have
canceled
won.
himself.
She could have won if she listened to Hutch.
dude, we live in a world where it's entirely possible that some fucking Fox News host or some like Charlie Kirk or someone with a massive platform could have gone
Obama's
through
following
her
porn stars.
What?
Is this true? Is that actually true?
What they do, he follows a
Is
shit ton
that
of
true,
people.
or are you just saying that?
I'm not just saying that. So what he does is he follows a shit ton of people, and some people
Yeah.
have like converted their accounts into like successful porn accounts, and so it just looks like Obama's following like all of the like random people. And
I mean,
It's like
I'd be
John
fine if
Cena.
I'd be fine if he was following porn stars. I'd
Would
be
you
like,
be?
oh, Obama,
Would you be
oh,
fine
Obama,
if, like-
follow a lot of
follows porn. Okay, I mean, it would. I mean,
I hope
obviously,
he's following porn
as long
stars.
as the porn stars are not problematic.
As long as it wasn't gay
problematic
porn.
stars,
He
yeah,
should
I mean,
be
he wasn't.
following-
He wasn't out here liking porn tweets on 9/11. Okay,
No, that was
Oh
that Ted
got that
Cruz?
going for him.
God.
Was that Ted Cruz?
Yeah,
that
I
was
think
Ted
it
Cruz. Yeah,
He was hacked. He was hacked, guys.
he blamed it on a staffer, but
Can
that
you
motherfucker
imagine
was
how
a
nervous
porn
he
tweet.
got?
Obama was bookmarking the porn tweets on 9/11 to keep them for his own private use, and he wasn't putting that
He's
out.
much more. He's much more discreet.
Yes.
When Ted Cruz, on the other hand, saw that he accidentally did that, the third tower fell.
Do you guys remember the?
What?
Do you guys remember this? Do you guys remember the staffers who got caught having sex in like the middle of
Got
the?
caught?
Yeah,
You mean-
bro.
Wait, no. When you say got caught, they filmed themselves
filmed it, yeah.
smiling and posted it
go.
on their social media.
Hey,
having
listen,
anal
hold on,
sex.
Pure
listen,
accident.
listen.
What are you talking about?
Here we go. The funny part about that.
Got
was
caught.
that they were both they were both gay. They were having gay sex. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course.
course.
But
He
what
says
they
with
said afterwards.
the biggest LGBT.
Hold on, listen,
flag.
listen. No, listen.
Thanks
What
for
they
that
said
disclaimer.
I remember them saying afterwards, they're like, the controversy surrounding this, they said something along the lines of the controversy surrounding this is, of course, as a result of the systemic homophobia
Oh my
in society.
God.
And it's like, wait. Look, I'm the wokest guy that there is. Okay, some say the most woke. Okay,
That was an insurrection.
people
That was an
say.
insurrection.
you can't have gay sex.
You can't have any sex. Oh, I just busted
Jesus,
him.
a
I
cowboy,
just
you
busted
can't
him.
have sex.
You can't have sex of any, but you can have blowjobs. That's what you're thinking,
Straight
right?
sex,
Like
straight sex. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course, of course.
Perfectly fine.
No, but that was like the funny. It was like the only reason you guys are mad about this is because we're gay, and it's like I think it was more that you filmed having sex, like sitting in a senator's chair in the committee room.
In a
Which
Senate
senator?
hearing room.
What
Yeah.
senator?
I don't know. I think they
That
sit
would
wherever
also-
they want. I don't know if they have assigned seating.
You know what they ought to do? They need to be putting like I
it was
don't
Dianne
know.
Feinstein, and it was really classless.
And she was in the seat at the time and had no idea
Oh
what was
my
going
God.
on.
Oh my god. Dianne Feinstein staffer. I can't remember who they were staffers for. They were Democratic staffers, though. I don't know who they actually worked for, though.
It's funny you say.
Oh, they
Feinstein,
were
'cause
Democrats. I mean, that's really the opposite of what I would expect. Given
well, Republicans
the,
aren't gay, Pisco. That's
Yeah.
they don't have gays.
Reportedly, this is true. Reportedly, that during the RNC, like Grinder traffic skyrocketed during the RNC.
That's the Super Bowl of Grindr.
Yeah.
according to
Coincidentally,
Coincidence, right? Sheer cosmic coincidence there.
Were you about to say coinkadink?
Coinkydink, I was
But
gonna
we were
do-
talking about gay things, and so you didn't want that to be juxtaposed.
Well, I didn't know if you all would catch the reference or if that was like a colloquial expression, because I know you're from New York. I think Kakana Boy's from Texas. I don't know if like Coinky Dink is like a.
I'm not
universal one.
originally from New York. I've lived in New York now for some time, but I feel weird saying I'm from
Prove it.
New
What
York.
address? No, I'm fucking with you. Don't do that.
Jesus, you want me killed?
No.
Wait, are you from
No.
Alabama or Kentucky or?
Kentucky. I was born in Pennsylvania, spent most of my life in Kentucky, and then moved to Charlotte,
What's the
North
first
Carolina.
Steve Shives video that you've ever watched?
It was actually from a DGG video or DGG
interrogation.
link, and it was again, if Republicans said the quiet parts out loud. No, wait a minute. It was one. Steve has a few of these, but where he was going off on Democrats not to play nice with Republicans. You have a few of those, Steve. It's a
Yeah.
I became a huge.
You have a
fan
lot of
after
those
that.
as well.
Yeah.
Josiah.
It's a burr under my saddle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, when we can find a way to like thread the needle here, because earlier the references were made to the debt ceiling, and I was going to ask you, Steve, you know, for those who didn't like follow this during the continuing resolution negotiations towards the end of last year, after our de facto president-elect Elon Musk torpedoed the bipartisan negotiations, the de jure president-elect insisted that the next continuing resolution include a debt ceiling increase or suspension or even abolition. You can just get rid of the whole damn thing.
Right.
Musk got what he wanted, or at least some of what he wanted, which I think was an exhalation of restrictions on domestic investment into China, which was benefiting him. Trump didn't get a goddamn thing. Trump did not get his debt ceiling, provision in this this continuing resolution because Democrats held firm. Democrats refused to raise the debt ceiling again on their watch, and they made it so that Trump would have to deal with it this year. That, I'll be honest with you, I was kind of surprised. I was afraid we were going to cuck out at the last second and be like, fuck it, we don't want the debt ceiling either. Here you go. What do you think about that, man? They finally, just a little bit, showed some ruthlessness.
I'm not going to get too excited about it because, like you say, it is just like, well, now let's see what they do next time and the time after and the time after. But yeah, I mean, it's encouraging. I would like to, it would have been nice if they would have been doing that all along and also behave that way when they had more actual political power. And, like it goes back to something I mentioned a little while ago. I mean, like just realizing what the actual situation is and realizing that the people that you are against are going to be as ruthless as they can possibly get away with being to get what they want. And while I don't think that Democrats should be doing everything Republicans do, because Republicans are willing to just throw the Constitution out the window, and I don't think we should be endorsing that, but we need to be willing to, be a little ruthless within the bounds of politics and law, right? But be ruthless and be hard asses. And, I mean, even though we lost the election and even though we are no longer the party in power, make them work for it. Like if all you can do for the next 2 to 4 years is make it as difficult as possible for them to enact their agenda, then fucking do that.
Is it a good sign for Republicans that Johnson was able to get through on the first round? I mean, there was technically some finagling going on there, but do you
Bro,
think
that was honestly super fucked. But yeah, let's talk about that for a second.
what was fucked about it? What do you mean?
Because, and I don't think this has ever been done, Aaron Frischner, who is Deputy Chief of Staff for Representative Don Bayer, and others have commented on this, that during that vote, it was reported, like the clerk already announced, okay, there's going to be a second ballot because the votes aren't here. There were 3 objections, and Johnson could only afford 1. Once it hit 2, it was over. But Republicans hid the counters, the people who were like the final tabulators of the count. They literally moved them out of the room to buy Johnson time so Johnson could flip. I think it was Keith Self. Yeah. Keith, that was why even though it was initially reported by Jake Sherman and Scott McFarland and others, like, yep, we're moving on to the second ballot. Johnson loses his first official ballot. CNN, Mediaite, others reported it. It wasn't gavelled in and tabulate, like the final tabulation wasn't announced with a swing of the gavel, because they literally put the people who are responsible for that out of the room to buy Johnson time. Super fucked, but technically within the bounds of the rules, because the rules don't stipulate that, the counters have to be on the floor and they have to announce within 30 seconds. It's just tradition.
I don't think that's a big deal.
It even caught veteran reporters off guard. It caught proceduralists, like I said, Aaron Frischner. And no, is it the end of the world compared to like what MAGA does on the regular? No, of course not. But to me, it's like, once again, it just goes to show that Republicans are so goddamn good at finding these ambiguities and like exploiting them in ways like they're hunting for like truffles. You know what I mean? They're like boars hunting for truffles. They're so good at it. And I don't think it would have ever occurred to Democrats to ever do anything like that.
Well, we can't say that Democrats should be ruthless and maybe play dirty or whatever and then be upset when they do it. It's just like if they find some technicality in the process to give them permission to do those kinds of things, and we'd probably applaud ourselves if we did that.
If we, I think. Well, it depends. But go ahead, Convoy.
I think that the big story here is of course that Johnson did survive, but my instinct is that a guy like Chip Roy or like some members of the Republican caucus, they're kind of like, it's like, hey, like we don't want to literally precede Trump's second term with a speaker fight, right? Like we're going to give you a chance to kind of, get things together and do what we want. But I do think that I think that with special elections throughout probabilistically speaking, special elections throughout 2025 and, obviously when your margins are so thin, like anything can happen. I think that they probably will have things come up where you see Johnson go down and, probably a new speaker get elected because it just becomes untenable. I mean, well, yeah, because number one, he's probably always down at least 2 votes, which is to say like he literally has to keep every other Republican happy. And again, this big tent is very unsustainable for the Republicans. I think especially when you start to consider that senators, like Republican senators, I don't know what it is. Like maybe it's just something about being a senator, or maybe like statewide. To win statewide, you have to be a lot less radical or whatever. But like senators seem to give substantially less of a fuck about cutting the deficit or like cutting spending, or like not raising the debt ceiling. Whereas members of the House, there's always going to be like a handful of members of the House, especially on the Republican side, that are willing to just blow shit up for various reasons. And so I feel my instinct is just that like every time there's a budget fight, it's like going to be chaotic. I expect Trump's probably going to break his record for the longest government shutdown in his second term. Like Trump had a longer government shutdown when he controlled all of Congress than when the Democrats were in charge of Congress, because the Democrats are just so much better people to work with. Like if you have a Republican Senate and Democratic House, that is like a more stable government than if you just have
Republican trifecta.
Yeah, exactly.
You think there's going to be a government? You think there's going to be a government shutdown when the Republicans control both the House and the Senate?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's what happened last time. Last time Republicans controlled the House and the Senate, and it was what was it, like a 35 day shutdown or something like that? It was very obviously.
Yeah, it was 2018 into 2019 before I think the House majority switched to the Democrats before they were.
Wait, are you sure? The Republicans were. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
in my head, the Democrats control the House then.
Not until they were seated after the 2018 midterms. But yes, I don't know, guys. Like I am still very worried. And yeah, I mean, I know some people are like, no, you shouldn't be worried. This is best case scenario. But I think politically, it's terrible. I think it's possible Donald Trump manages to just, through sheer dumb luck, make it through the next 4 years without any sort of like seismic kerfuffle. And no, I don't think the country will be better off as a consequence of it. I think that he'll just politically, his party will benefit for the 2028 election. Like I wouldn't put.
I think you're memory holding. I think you're memory holding his first term. I feel like chaos follows that man. There's just no way that this is just going to be like a standard presidency. It's
Trump
just
was so
who
bad.
he is.
Trump was so bad. He inspired 81 million people to vote for Joe Biden, who, by all accounts, was like one of the worst candidates. Even in 2020, like Joe Biden was not a very strong candidate in many respects, right?
In 2020,
dude, in 2020, yes, like Joe Biden barely campaign. Like he was definitely not.
Bro,
as
you sound like a Trumper.
we were in the middle of a COVID situation.
It was a pandemic.
Okay, we cannot pretend, guys. This is Pisco, you're gonna
What?
love this.
Steve,
You're
I should have told you. Conaboy is our fiscal
This-
conservative here. He's a Republican.
He wasn't
Pisco,
campaigning, bro.
Pisco, this is blue MAGA. You're being blue MAGA right now. Okay.
I'm being blue MAGA?
Biden was not.
You're
an optimal
saying
candidate in 2020. He won
You're complaining
because-
that he didn't campaign when deaths were at like 3,000 a day.
What makes
Like,
a candidate strong, but for
He
like
also
his
didn't do a
polling,
lot
which
of
was
interview-
good?
He didn't do a lot of interviews, and don't get me wrong. If you
You
rewatch
sound
the
like a
first
Trumper.
presidential
You're
debate-
like, oh, she didn't go on Joe Rogan.
Pisco, are you under the presumption that Biden was a perfect candidate in 2020? Can you answer
I
that
never.
question?
Oh, look
Can you
at what
answer
you
that
just
question,
did.
please? Can you answer that
No,
question?
I didn't say. No, I didn't say he was
Thank you for
perfect.
answering my
always
question.
like
But that's
this.
Thank
all
you
we're
for answering my
discussing. You
question.
said he was a weak candidate. Look
if
at
I
the
could
little
just
shell
finish,
game right there.
If I could just finish.
Yeah, okay, finish.
But that's all to say that I think that it's not that Joe Biden was like the most disastrous candidate in 2020. It's just that certainly we could probably imagine a more optimal candidate in various ways. But it is to say that
Yeah,
Trump
fucking
inspired a
Kal-El
lot-
from James Gunn's new Superman.
Well, yeah,
You
Gumbo.
can't. No,
Gumbo?
he's not eligible. He wasn't born in the United
But no,
States.
Oh fuck.
That's true.
Lawyered.
Not a
Well
natural.
done, Steve. Yeah.
Lawyered. Where's that?
Yeah.
Are you a lawyer?
Yeah.
Except in the John Byrne version in the comics, where he emerged from the birthing matrix after crashing in Kansas. So technically,
John
he wasn't
Burns?
born on
Is he
United
like Ken
States.
Burns' brother, but he does Superman?
So I mean, they spell their names completely differently, so they're not related.
How do you know that?
Because I know
Because he
that John
reads.
Burns. I know that John Byrne, the comic writer, spells his name with a Y, and Ken Burns, the documentarian, spells his
Is
name
it with
with
like
a U.
Mr. Burns?
Like
Got
Mr. Burns, exactly.
Yeah.
And again,
Well,
also they're completely separate people, and I'm familiar with both their work.
To finish the point, quickly to finish. So because Pisco interrupted me, bad faith Pisco as usual. But no,
Merrick
basically
Garland
what-
loving fucking Pisco right there.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, shouldn't be surprised. But no, basically Trump was even when Trump had a good economy at the turn of 2019, he was still very unpopular, and his reelection chances were still pretty up in the air, even with a pretty good economy in 2019. And he's a very polarizing figure. And if what Josiah is saying is true, which is that some combination of what Josiah and Pisco is saying is true, which is that Trump is both a little bit more competent and also a little bit more willing to kind of go further than he did in his first term. I think even if the economy hums along, he's probably going to do so much crazy shit that people are like radically upset with his performance. Now, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean that his approval rating is going to go to 20%, but if his approval rating goes from 50, like a true 50%, which is kind of what it seems like it is right now, to like a true 40%, that's a terrible environment for Republicans coming into 26 and 28. So that's just my expectation. I think it'll be very chaotic. I think Trump will do a lot of things to piss a lot of people off.
Well, I think no matter what, for like the first at least 6 months, maybe even a year, I think that American voters are going to be giving him probably a little bit of slack, especially the ones that voted for him, because they're kind of like bought into it, right? And so like I feel like it's going to take a while for them to, if he starts really like torching everything and lighting things on fire, you might see a lot of people hang on just for the first little bit because they won't want to acknowledge that they made a bad choice.
I don't know if you all heard this, but speaking of like next Trump initiatives, obviously the next political project is to get confirmations for his cabinet nominees. Now, reportedly, John Thune, the new Republican majority leader, told Trump, CBS broke the story yesterday, that Pete Hegseth already has the votes. Former Fox News host, current Secretary of Defense nominee who has been credibly accused of sexual misconduct, as well as reportedly struggles.
He's a weekend Fox News host.
That's right. He's the B team. Yeah, he's Fox and Friends weekend. But apparently he has the votes reportedly to pass confirmation. So he's not the worst. I imagine most of us would agree he's not the worst of the candidates. He's up there. But if Pete Hegseth already has the votes, do you think that there would be any Trump nominees that die in the proverbially, that their nomination dies in the confirmation hearing, or do you think they'll sail through?
Just feels impossible to predict at this point.
I don't know. I feel like if any of them don't make it, that's a gift. That's a bonus for us. It wouldn't surprise me at all if, you're right. Hegseth isn't even the worst one, which is a damning statement in and of itself. There's people
he's
saying,
really bad. Just
Oh,
for
he's
the
terrible.
record, I mean, like he's
horrible.
really, really bad. He's
but I think
motivated by a
Patel-
religious dogma. He idolizes the Crusades. I mean, it's pretty bad. Kash Patel is
But-
probably worse, but
Yeah, I think
by
that's
by
alcohol.
any rational standard, just nominating someone like him would be disqualifying. You know what I mean? It's like, no, who are you seriously nominating for Secretary of Defense? Like, no, he's awful. But yeah, there's Kash Patel, there's RFK Jr., there's fucking Dr. Oz to run the Medicare administration. Like, there's all kinds of, but no, I don't expect, any of them to really be threatened. I mean, if that happens, if some of them don't have the votes or they have to withdraw, I consider that a gift.
The median voter is not going to be paying attention to the cabinet appointments, the hearings, any of that. Like, I just feel like probably solid 60-70% of the country don't know, don't care. And I mean, if there's political pressure, if there's some viral moment that goes nuts on Twitter as a result of these confirmation hearings, then maybe you can see some movement in the other direction. But for the most part, people are not going to be tuning into these hearings.
I think just to start off, like the Trump team's strategy of basically telling their entire appointed cabinet, don't do any media interviews, just stay completely out of the media. That's
don't even
clearly
post on social media.
Yeah, that has clearly been just absolute chef's kiss. Like, that's the perfect thing he could have told his crazy nominees to do. Like, hey, we get it, you're crazy. We nominated you because you're an insane person, but we can't be having you be insane in public. Like, just take a step back. Don't write any new kids' books, Kash Patel. Pete Hegseth, don't, grope anybody else, at a drunk Fox News party, guys. Just let's just phone it in for the next few months, and see if we can get you to those hearings without much controversy. Now, I think you're right, Josiah, that the hearings themselves, or I think maybe Hutch that said, the hearings themselves could have an incredible amount of controversy associated with them. And it's one big question mark for me is not necessarily how the Republicans will vote, but you're seeing John Fetterman, who's like, I actually like his nomination to be the secretary, or what is it, like the representative at the UN, and Tulsi's not so bad according to some Democrats in the Senate, and it's like,
Bernie
okay,
too.
well, I'm extremely curious how the Democrats and Democratic aligned independents will vote, because I wouldn't be totally surprised if you have like some Republicans that say, I'm against RFK Jr. because he's radical on abortion. But then, yeah, maybe you have like John Fetterman, who's like, I don't know, this guy seems all right, I'm going to vote for him. And it's like, well, fuck, maybe he does like squeak by with like a Democratic vote or two. So
Marco Rubio is going to get bipartisan support 100%. But yeah, like the wildly controversial ones, like I know Pisco said he kind of drew his red line that, as a former Bernie supporter, if Bernie votes for RFK Jr. to be Secretary of Health,
he should have no place in the leadership of the country. I would advocate for him to be primaried during any. Well, he's an independent, but I would
same with Tulsi
for a Democratic opposition to Bernie. If there is a Democratic senator who votes for RFK Jr., they should be primaried, and we should try to get them out of office. 100%.
Steve, what about you as a progressive? As somebody who respects Bernie, would you be offended or perturbed if Bernie Sanders votes for any of the more controversial Trump nominees like Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., or Kash Patel? I would be.
I don't think any Democratic senator should vote for any of his nominees. Like, I still remember in 2016, 2017, when Trump was elected the first time, the only Democratic senator who voted against all of his nominees was Kirsten Gillibrand. Every other Democrat in the Senate voted at least for one of his nominees for the cabinet. She was the only one who said, fuck this, I'm not voting to approve any of these guys. And I wish that she was not the only one, but I was, very proud of her for being that person to say, no, what are we doing? Why are we voting for this? Like, there's nothing you can do to stop it. They have the numbers to approve them without us. So what's the, but at least to take a stand, to say, like, these people are not, you may have won the election and you have the right to do this, but we don't have to help you do it. And, these people are not fit to govern, and this is going to be a disaster, and I'm not going to help this along, even if it's just symbolically. I mean, I made a video several weeks ago now, maybe a couple months ago now, post-election though, about Bernie Sanders expressing showing some daylight as far as the RFK Jr. nomination, and saying like, well, some of his views on food safety are valid. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? I don't care what his views on food safety are. He's an anti-vaxxer. Period. That's disqualifying, especially since he's being nominated to head the fucking HHS. Like, there's no discussion here.
Well, here's a question, guys. I'm actually curious what you guys think. Do you think that okay, so let's just say that RFK Jr. gets voted down, right? Like he gets voted down, some combination of Republicans and Democrats vote him down. Like, do we think that RFK Jr. is literally the worst person Trump could nominate? Because I could imagine Trump putting like Rand Paul as the head of HHS, and like he's probably worse than RFK Jr. Like like what do you make a strategic decision like that? Like maybe he's not literally the worst person who could get confirmed. Like I'm not sure, I guess.
I mean, the fact that he was able to, when he didn't have any, political positions in American Samoa, the fact that he was able to influence things there and anti-vax sentiment there to the extent that they experienced their first measles outbreak in like decades, and 82 or 83 people, mostly kids, died. Now put him at the head of Health and Human Services for a country with 330 million people. In terms of the actual human cost, he might be the worst. He might be the worst cabinet pick. Like if they start banning vaccine mandates for schools or whatever, I don't know if they have the authority to do that.
I think that this is like the logic that someone like Bernie might have. And I don't know that I'm actually kind of skeptical that Bernie is going to actually vote for RFK Jr. But I think that this might be some of the logic that left-leaning members of the Senate who are considering Trump nominees might have. It's like, well, some of the nominees that Trump made literally are just the worst. Like Matt Gaetz is, I have a hard time thinking of like a worst possible person to be attorney general other than Matt Gaetz. But with like, Secretary of Health and Human Services, it's like, well, I guess I could imagine a worse person. But it's a black box, right? You don't actually know who's going to come after RFK Jr. Trump might just make RFK Jr. like the acting head of HHS, and who cares if the Senate voted him down, right? I could see a situation like that happening. So, but I generally agree with Pisco that a Democrat that votes for RFK Jr. is almost certainly using very, very disqualifying logic to do so.
So
doesn't Bernie also have a personal tie to Tulsi? Don't they get along because Tulsi like went to bat for him in 2016 and
I bet they don't get along now. I've heard that they previously got. I'd be stunned if he said a word of affirmation about her now, given the pivot. I do.
Okay.
Well, maybe I'm wrong on that, but I know Pisco's got a hard out at 9, so in 15 minutes. So I do, if it's all right with you guys, since we brought it up earlier. Pisco mentioned again his ongoing feud with the Young Turks. So Steve, again, not to put you on the spot, you can answer this however you want, but are you aware of what's gone on in the Young Turks land, the new strategy of what I call MAGA diplomacy?
Yeah, I'm dimly aware of it. I'm sort of aware of it via osmosis, just by hearing other people on social media talk about it. I mean, to be completely honest, I never paid super close attention to the Young Turks in the first place. So it's not like I feel super strong about it. I just think, oh, okay. That sounds like people. It sounds like people just being opportunistic assholes.
Well, that's there you go. Okay, that was pretty blunt.
I mean,
That's
I'm not. Yeah, that's what. I mean, that's what it seemed. But see, I would feel the same way about anybody who was, whether they call it, trying to reach across the aisle, building bridges, blah blah blah. Like I take an extremely dim view of all of that, given the nature of Trump and his movement, and given the how repeatedly the Republican Party has proven that they are a bad faith party, and that they're not interested in actually having any kind of productive dialogue with Democrats or liberals or progressives or whatever at all. So I think if nothing else, it's a waste of time, in addition to being, morally reprehensible to be reaching out to people like this.
I mean, there you go. It's a pretty unambiguous stance. I guess kind of tying all these things together. Do you see any merit whatsoever in both, like in terms of activists in media, like the Young Turks, who, have always styled themselves as progressive activists, progressive commentators, or elected representatives like Bernie Sanders or others? Like, do you think it is the right thing to do is to take just a firm opposition against the Trump administration? Because some would say, I imagine John Fetterman or people who are Congressman Ro Khanna would say, well, listen, we have an obligation to work with the Trump administration when necessary. or where we can. And I don't know where I am on that. Do you know where you are on that with you?
I mean, I'm open to entertaining exceptions, but in general, I don't see the point. And I don't see what realistically is going to be accomplished in our favor. You know, I mean, like I said, if there happens to be, if some opportunity opens where there is some consensus on a particular issue that would be good for our side, that would be, you know, moving things in the right direction instead of the wrong direction, like, of course I wouldn't oppose that, but I just don't expect there to be too many of those, you know, and in general, I just think it's a waste of time.
What about you?
You also seem to be working when under this assumed paradigm of like we all need to work together as a party for our, you know, collective interests. But the reality is that these forces within the Senate and the House are, you know, these are disparate forces that are motivated by totally different things. And so I don't expect that level of cohesion. I mean, I agree that it would be nice to have that level of cohesion, but yeah, I mean, to Econoboy's point, I think it's very plausible, if not likely, that Fetterman is going to, you know, vote to confirm all of his nominees. And it's just he's appealing to a much more moderate type of voter in Pennsylvania, and you know that might work out for him, right?
In my opinion, Fetterman should be primaried if he votes for Patel. Fetterman should be primaried if he votes for
all of his nominees.
Yeah, if you can, right? If you can, sure.
No. We should be actively. The Democratic Party should go after Fetterman if he votes for any one of the most problematic here. I put Gabbard, I put RFK, I put Kash Patel.
So you'd want Schumer to basically sit him down and be like, hey, listen, if you need to vote for Rubio or somebody to like show your moderate bona fides, that's fine. But if you vote for...
It's a line in the sand because these guys are fascists, and those people are uniquely dangerous to the health and safety of the American people. Kash Patel, in no possible world, is qualified to be the director of the FBI. RFK Jr., I don't even have to go into it. So like those most unqualified individuals, I mean, pick your battles, but you should pick 3 or 4 or 5 of them. I mean, all of these you should vote down, really. But in terms of us going after our own people, I obviously, as a matter of pragmatism, you should limit it to the most objectionable. I think that's fair. But yeah, if you vote for RFK, you should be primaried.
If you vote for Kash Patel, what do you think about that? Do you agree or disagree?
For RFK, I mean, to the extent that it's possible. So like, I would support a primary effort if it made sense and, you know, if it stood a chance of actually succeeding. I don't know, like if Fetterman votes to confirm like Marco Rubio, I don't think I'm gonna give a fuck, to be honest.
I expect Rubio to get like 60 votes. So for that stuff, I'm a pragmatist before I'm an ideologue. But what I'm saying, I would vote down all these motherfuckers because I think that that's the right thing to do. But I'm picking my battles, and for me, RFK is a step too much. Kash Patel is a step too much. Matty Gaetz would be a step too much. And if you're a Democrat voting for these motherfuckers, I don't have time for you. That's a step too much. You're MAGA.
Well, I think there's also a difference between, like, I wouldn't play much political parlor games when it comes to confirming people to head administrative agencies. Because again, I just think generally we should always be very technocratic with these appointments. Like, who should head the military, the Department of Defense? Well, it's just like whoever the most qualified person is. Like, I don't really think we should, you know, do a lot of political appointees for these kind of positions in terms of like the motivations for why they get appointed. But kind of like what Steve said earlier, if there's like specific platform issues that you could get like progressives and MAGA to agree on, like for instance, right, something that AOC called Trump's bluff on, I think Bernie did the same thing. Oh, you're really in favor of capping credit card interest at 10%? Here's a bill that does that. Let's just see if we can actually get it through. Like I think that's probably a productive use of time, because it both makes them look like hypocrites, but then maybe actually you do get like Thomas Massey and like, you know, these other weird MAGA people to co-sponsor a bill together. There's also some maybe potential movement on like, you know, I saw like a Republican introduced a bill to end gerrymandering because he's about as pissed off at like, you know, places like New York as Democrats are in North Carolina. And it's like, it's pretty inconceivable that a bill like that would get passed. But I mean, like, I don't know, like maybe that is a bipartisan issue that you could get some movement on, like conceivably. Trump, I mean, when Trump's first term, he passed the First Step Act, which I think was pretty much universally agreed to be like a genuinely good bill, that Democrats liked it, Republicans liked it because Trump said he liked it. So there may be some issues like that, but it's just few and far between, and mostly it's probably unproductive, like Steve said.
He reportedly lamented the First Step Act because he felt like he wasn't rewarded for it from black voters in 2020.
Yeah.
He's like, why did I even do that if they didn't vote for me?
Yeah, he's like, man, I should have just kept all these black people locked up. You know, they didn't even vote. For
Literally,
me.
that's what he did, actually.
It's probably a Truth Social somewhere. That's probably like
I'm
a
sure it
verbatim. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
But
don't-
in theory, there's maybe some issues like that could come up again, and I don't see the problem with getting those passed. But if you're like, oh, like I'm gonna pass like a 99% draconian immigration bill because it allows DACA kids to stay here for an extra 8 months, it's like, okay, well, this doesn't seem totally, you know, at a certain point, it's like you're not getting much for the squeeze, you know. So
do any of you plan on watching the inauguration? Because I actually don't think I will be. I think that I might just like pay attention.
I'm going to
briefly.
watch it for sure.
You're going to stream the whole thing. I admire, I mean, I genuinely, and I've told Luke this too, like people who can watch, like I struggled when Luke and I streamed the RNC convention, like the anger I had for these fucking
No,
people.
you on election night was brutal because I know you a little bit, and so I knew. I mean, your whole demeanor completely shifted, and
bro. But
tough,
to be
man.
fair,
It's really tough.
just to be clear, like that wasn't all like depression. That was like the way Luke had it set up because we were at Luke's studio. He didn't have like any monitors for us to like really look at except for one. So if like he had his iPad, I had mine. And so we were looking down constantly refreshing for hope. And obviously it didn't go, but it showed up on my face that like that was resting depression face. I can't do that.
And
like
you had, the way you guys blocked it too, it was close up.
Bro,
it was like two thin, really like close up shots. And your face was just like, I remember telling, because I was watching you guys on my stream and I was like, man, I feel for these guys right now. It's tough.
It was bad. So besides Hutch, is anyone enough of a glutton for punishment that they will be watching Trump's inauguration?
I probably will.
No.
Trump has nothing good to say or interesting to say, you know. So
I wouldn't. If somebody offered to pay me to watch it, I'd have to think about it.
To be like, what's your rate? Let's negotiate.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how much is it worth to you to get me to watch this thing? No, I have no interest in watching it.
Fair enough. Well, then as we wind down, since Steve was our guest, I am curious, Steve, to the extent that you're able to discuss it. And by the way, Econo Boy, this is Steve Shives. I've got his channel up, 280,000 subscribers. Yeah,
Could you introduce me, please?
Yeah, for the fourth fucking time. Here is Steve
Pretty fucked up that you didn't do that the first time, but yeah.
God damn it! And I see somebody in chat. Who is Steve Shives? I'm gonna do something.
Who's the real Steve Shives? We still.
I'm not sure I even know at this point.
Yeah, well, let me tell you
getting existential
about Steve
with
Shives.
the boys.
I'm having a crisis, I think.
What's next in the pipeline with respect to political content? Have you taken a bit of a break from it, or because I saw it's been a couple of days? Your most recent one was about President Carter.
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't taken a break from it. No, I have taken a break from the Republicans saying the quiet parts loud thing. I'm not quite sure.
Because they're saying it out loud.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not quite sure.
Because we live in hell. It's hell.
Because we live in hell. Yeah. It's like, what am I going to, am I going to just
quote them?
Dude, I'm with you on that one.
I'm just going to do one the day after Trump's inauguration and just say his speech verbatim. I mean,
I'm with you, man. I feel like right now just really sucks in terms of like covering politics.
Yes.
And I've spoke to this on the podcast before, but it's just, there's nothing we can do. There's just like, it's just a hurry up and wait situation. So like once he's inaugurated and starts doing stuff, then our positions become more clarified. Then it becomes like more clear what areas we can, lobby against or whatever. But now it's just fucking, what is there to talk about? Like, am I saying anything original here?
Well, and that's been a challenge for me too. And I have 2 videos going up on my channel tomorrow about political issues, but nothing like Trump related, nothing sort of big picture electoral politics type thing. Although one of them it touches on the H-1B visa debate, but it comes at it more from it's focused on Douglas Wilson, who is this Christian minister, podcast host, et cetera, who spoke about it recently and said, basically said, well, the H-1B visa is legal, but if we let all these people, like let's say we let in 60,000 Hindus, well, that's going to dilute the character of the country. And I was like, oh, I wonder what he's talking about there. I wonder why he's worried. But what do you mean by diluting the country? That sounds, so like that's one. And then another one is there's another, both of the videos tomorrow coincidentally are about far right fundamentalist Christians saying insane things. And the other one is about a guy, a self-professed Christian prophet who said that he got a vision, he got a prophecy from God that says that Joe Biden's going to die soon because he gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to George Soros.
Oh my God.
Stuff like that. Like I'm finding things like that I feel like I can riff on and make fun of and maybe have something entertaining or useful to say about. But yeah, you're right. In terms of like Trump and what's coming next as far as big picture politics, we're kind of in that zone right now where it's like there's not a whole lot. I mean, you can only talk about how bonkers his cabinet picks are so many times,
But yeah, before you become a withered husk like me. On that note, Pisco has to go. He's got a hard out.
Steve, thank you so much for coming in. It was a great convo, and let's do this again.
It was a pleasure. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you. Please.
I have to go as well.
Yeah. Please go to Steve Shives' channel, like and subscribe. If you haven't, Econoboy, I'll send it to you since you haven't seen it. Thank you, everybody.
And also, by the way, Econoboy, you're a good guy. I don't think that you would have sex in the.
It's okay. Hey, by the way, when Pisco ranks like his favorite political commentators, he never includes us. Yeah, no, he doesn't. Like he could rank his top 5 favorite Econoboys, and this Econoboy would come in at number 7. I'm convinced.
He's done that before, Steve. He said these are my most recommended follows. He forgot to list all of his hosts on his podcast.
He's a fucking prick like that.
Not
Steve.
just Aya. He says Destiny. Doesn't even do a show with Destiny. All right.